My name is Curtis Jacobs. I am the founder of Curtis Jacobs Gallery here in Harlem, former corporate executive and author of Demystifying Corporate America.
All right. And how did you come to know Barry?
Barry Charles Johnson became a familiar face in my gallery. First time I met him, aside from just seeing him out on the street, I met him officially. He came to our inaugural opening. And I think it was October 9th, 2009, and it was a solo exhibition by Jack H. White, and I believe he and Jack lived in the same apartment building, so he came out to support Jack, and he came to subsequent exhibitions from there.
What's your fondest memory of Barry?
So I think about a fond memory, and I think the fondest memories of him, just him being a kind human being, someone who's very thoughtful, someone who would come out to support artists, experienced artists, the emerging artists. He always had a word of encouragement, and he supported their work. And what I was most fond of him was the fact that he would come to an exhibition, and some artists have the tendency to promote their work at someone else's exhibition, right? And it's human nature, right? Hey, I just want you to know that I do these things. Barry never did that. At least he never did it at my gallery. And I just thought that that was a heavy-duty dose of integrity there. And when he came there to support an artist, he was there to support that artist. And I remember Jack having that show. Should we continue this pause? New York is, it's just, you can't make the show. It's the fire truck, the garbage truck, the homeboys walking down the street with it. I'm like.
It literally does not stop. Okay, let's see. Passes.
Hopefully they're not stopped in that corner. I had a number of fond memories of Barry. While I did not know him extremely well, he frequented the gallery. He'd come to the gallery for a number of exhibitions. And what I found very delightful about him was he always had an encouraging word for me as a gallery founder. For my gallery director, Paula, he was very supportive of the exhibitions that she curated, and most importantly, how much he supported other artists through kind words of encouragement, or just by showing up and being present. And when I say by being present, he was focused on the work that was there and not promoting himself. And I know sometimes when folks go to exhibitions, it's kind of like, hey, I'm gonna support this artist, but I'm gonna get some networking in. And I just never found that about him. He was very focused about the artist and very complimentary about the work, or he was just very encouraging to the artist. First time I met him was at my Jack White exhibition, and it was Jack's first solo exhibition. And what I loved most about Barry when he came to Jack White's exhibition was how excited he was for Jack. Jack was his neighbor, which I did not know. They lived in the same building. There were a number of other artists that were there, collectors that were there, Adja Cowens, photographer Dwight White. And when I look back on some of those old photos from 16 years ago, they had a sense of community, and they were all very supportive of each other. And they would point out, do you know what that guy used to do? You know what this person used to do? And it was a nice learning experience. So Barry, I liked the way he just carried himself, and I liked how supportive he was, not just to me, but to other artists. One thing that just stood out in my mind when I learned about his passing is some words of wisdom that he imparted on me. There was a show at my gallery, I guess it was Massimo Licata, and his wife was outside, and there was a panhandler who was being a bit aggressive with her. And I came outside to try to move him away from her and move her out of harm's way. And we kind of got a little heated. And Barry came, he was just walking by and he came and put his arms around me and he walked me back into the gallery. And he put his hands on my shoulder and made me face him. And he said, it's important that you understand how much you mean to this community and how much this gallery means to this community. Don't ever put yourself at risk. And you know, I used to live by this mantra that people see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And that was one of those moments. I didn't see it the way he saw it, but he was thinking from a legacy perspective. Now, that was probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago, but those words still resonate with me.
Okay. Running long battery on the camera, so we'll just go into it. Can you describe Barry's art and how was his art a representation of him? Could you see Barry in his different forms of art style, and also talk about kind of him being an abstractionist as well?
So the first time I saw Barry's work, and you know, I didn't see it in person. He never invited me to his studio to see his work. He wasn't that type of person, right? A lot of artists was, hey, I want you to come take a look at my work. Barry didn't do a lot of self-promotion, at least not to me. But when I saw his work, you know, I was captivated by it. I pretty much figured that he was an abstractionist just by his personality, and not that, you know, some people refer to abstractionists as people who are like, it's kind of a version of organized confusion, right? But in a lot of the work, I saw serenity. I felt serenity from some of the work. And, you know, he was very soft-spoken, even though he was a really good-looking, very suave, debonair type of guy, but he was just not a whole lot of unnecessary words, just calm, cool, collective, and I could see that in his work. Like, his work was kind of, you know, some of the canvases would kind of look like Barry walking down the block. So, you know, some of the work that I saw was, the colors were a little more muted, and then, you know, you saw these works where there's bursts of reds and fuchsia and mauve, and his color palette was broad. Yeah, his work just screamed serenity to me, but I think it touched other emotions and it spoke to other emotions.
Can you also talk about the art scene in Harlem, just in general?
The art scene in Harlem today or yesterday, or over the last couple of decades?
Let's say yesterday.
So, the art scene in Harlem is, I think, complicated because Harlem there's this constant shift, and you know, from when I first opened my gallery officially as Renaissance Fine Art, as it was originally founded, it was 16 years ago, but you know, was untitled for a couple of years prior to that. I thought we had more creatives here, and I thought we had more Harlemites here, which, you know, you don't see as much. A lot of the people who were here years ago aren't here anymore. When I look at photographs from the earlier exhibitions in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, a lot of people are gone. They've moved on. They've retired. A number are deceased. So the art scene is fluid. A number of the galleries have opened and since closed over the years. But I think the art scene I think it's time for a revival. I think it's time for, I think the time is good. I think it's needed, it's necessary. Things that are happening, especially with these institutions that you know, we support culture and storytelling through art, and with books being banned and exhibitions being censored. I think the art scene in Harlem, which I guess is the culture capital for Black folks anywhere in the world, is more important than ever. You know, I have roots here. for over 20 years. My great-grandmother had my grandmother's oldest son here in 1903. And my father came here in 1957. So my family's been here doing something over a number of years. And, my father was a painter. So it's more than ever, I think it's important that these galleries exist. Lewis's gallery, my gallery, Heath Gallery, S.E. Green's gallery is reopening, Studio Museum of Harlem reopening, and there are other galleries here in the vicinity or within 10 blocks, Claire Oliver. So the art scene is, I think it's evolving, and I'm excited about what it can be. But I just think that Harlem, since I've had my gallery, has kind of been somewhat of a state of flux, right? Like 2008, we know what happened when the financial crisis, and there was a lot of uncertainty. Then we had the pandemic, right? Now we're in another type of moment, right? So this is every time you think you're gonna turn the corner, there's this moment, and I think we have the right people here to meet this moment. The talent is definitely here.
Do you consider Harlem being like a mecca for the art space in terms of music, movies, artistry?
Hell yeah. Absolutely. I would have dropped the F-bomb if I wasn't saved. Oh, hell yeah, man. Originally, my gallery was, named Renaissance Fine Art, right? That Renaissance era of creatives inspired me throughout my life. So Harlem is the mecca for a number of things, especially for creatives and culture. Harlem is indeed. When I was when I was a Wall Street executive, I worked out of the country a lot. I'd be in Asia, I'd be in Africa, Dubai, and over the course of the weekend, I'm in casual clothes. If I had a shirt on that said Harlem, people would stop and ask me questions. Or in the coffee shop, hey, tell me what Harlem's like. So that's a brand that is recognized worldwide. I've known Barry since meeting him in 2009 at the Jack White exhibition at my gallery. And he came to support Jack, who was his neighbor in his building. So, after that exhibition, he was a familiar face in the gallery, whether it was an exhibition or he was just coming by to say hello. My hopes are that Barry's work gets the recognition that it deserves. He is, born, bred, and buttered in Harlem, as my friend Melba would say, who owns the restaurant. And he was important to this community, and important in a different way. He wasn't the person out in front, and he was just kind of this silent contributor, very humble, but very visible. And that's appreciated, at least by me. So my hopes and prayers that Barry's work gets the recognition that it deserves, and that this exhibition is a success. And I'll do my part to help support, the elevation of his legacy. And of Barry's work is that it gets the notoriety and acclaim that the work deserves, and that he deserves as an artist and as a human being. The man walked with dignity, he walked with integrity, and it's a reflection in his work. The detail, the thought, and the care that went into these visuals. So I just really hope that this exhibition is well supported, and that Barry's legacy is elevated far beyond what he could have ever hoped for.
Perfect. At the butter, my camera's about to die.
Okay.
Good. Let me in the recording.
I'm Cheryl Johnson. I'm Barry's youngest sister. There are 3 children. My oldest brother is Robert Johnson, Jr. Then there's Barry Charles Johnson, and there's me, Cheryl Ann Johnson. So I'm the baby of the group.
And can you talk about, as a child, did he have any artistic abilities that were noticeable?
Yeah, I think he came out drawing because my mother tells the story of when he was in public school that she was upset with them because they talked about how well he drew, but she wanted him to be educated, you know. So she took him out of public school and put him in Catholic school so he could get a different type of education. I don't know what the name of the school was, but it became Music and Art on Convent Avenue. And he went to Catholic school, St. Joseph's, right here on 125th Street in Morningside. And then he went to art and design. You know, I wasn't around during that period, so that part is a little vague to me. All I know, he had a proliferation of work, and that it wasn't until I came back up here to live in 2012 that I really saw what he was doing art-wise, and even so, I didn't know the breadth of it until after he passed, and we had to, collect his work, and Louis came along and, gathered them up so they wouldn't go into the trash because we didn't have space to put it. So, and I want to thank Louis Long for giving Barry.
Take your time.
Giving Barry's art a place to live. Because, he was probably as complicated as some of his artwork. But he was very a friendly person, but then he was also kind of moody, I don't know if you want to call that artistic, but I lend that more to the fact that he was a Gemini, so we had both twins, and
You mentioned that sometimes he dressed like his artwork.
oh, not sometimes, all the time. He was a walking art. He wore bright colors because he was very fair-skinned, and you could see him, But I think that people that lived in the building, especially the guys that he hung, because he talked to a lot of the people in the building because Dorothy was over the management of the building. So between the two of them, they kind of helped the tenants out, even though that wasn't his artwork, but that was how he's known through the building as being very helpful and very nice.
Take your time.
I'm trying. So, that's why I was asking other people to give their input, because there's an aspect of him that I wasn't familiar with, because I lived in Georgia for a while and in Florida, so we went our separate ways for a while. But I know that he and Dorothy met in 1966. So when I figured that out, that meant that they were collaborating for 55 years. And, she was older, but she saw the potential he had, and she supported him that way. And because she was older, they had a dedication to each other that was, you don't see very often. They really took care of each other. Oh, sorry. And so whatever fault you might find with him, they were dedicated to each other. And, he dabbled in some of everything. I'm sure there's some stuff that I don't even know about. But I could honestly say that he was a Renaissance man because sorting through his things now, after he's gone, I'm finding all kinds of things that I never knew about. And believe me, he was a talker. He would talk about some of the people that he met, like when he met Billy D. Williams, and what kind of conversation they had. Different people throughout his time in the world, like his voice coach and arranger was Danny Holgate, who's another person in the musical world who was well known with certain plays on Broadway and stuff. And then he was influenced by Ed Clark, another artist. I found pictures of him and Roman Bearden. It seemed like he hobnobbed with some of everybody, politically, artistically. He also had income from doing commercials. He sang, he had certain gigs. He was with, what was his name? John Lucien. He did a show with John Lucien, so. And he also would do repair work, He and Dorothy shared a brownstone in Brooklyn, and they renovated that. So you name it, he pretty much did it. He played basketball in high school and as an adult, long beyond his like after he got out of high school, he played basketball in Europe, and he served in the Air Force, and I don't know that he left anything undone. I'm sorry, but he was very creative, and I can tell by his pictures that he was very insightful, because the more you look at his work, the more you see. It's not like, oh, okay, I get it. You stare at it, something else keeps coming at you, So he was very insightful, which, probably pissed a lot of people off. But, he's my brother, and
How do you think Harlem has influenced his artwork?
his artwork. I think it's influenced his life. Because he traveled in Europe and stuff like that, but he's always lived in Harlem. When he was in high school, I think it was 1969, he had an art piece in the Studio Museum, which is now under being placed in a different part of Harlem. So, if I'm not mistaken, it was a sculpture piece of two dolphins. I remember that from when I was in school, But I'm the baby of the group, so, some of my memories might be faulty.
Can you talk about some of the artwork you have in your apartment right now? And I guess getting the artwork from the old
Apartment?
studio?
Well, this artwork came from the apartment that he was living in with Dorothy. And so far out of all of them, I like this one, the Cloud Rider, because you have to really look at them to appreciate what they're about, because some of it is so dark, in color, that unless you see it in really good light, you're not catching the essence of what's going on. The first piece that was my favorite was that it was kind of shaped like a guitar, but then when you looked at it, there was an embryo in where the guitar opening was, And that was a long time ago. A long time ago. And so I tend to favor his black and white. So I was glad in a sense that Devin didn't take these or couldn't take them. So I said, well, I got a spot for him. I got plenty of empty wall, you know. So I was glad that I could incorporate them. So, you know. Again, because of what was left behind. And my other son, Aaron Johnson Davis, he helped me organize that because a lot of the paintings had been left in a closet in the studio where he was painting, you know. And so that's when I really got to see the whole thing, because he had one piece that I think was comprised of 35 different pieces, and I never saw that in its totality, you know. But I knew when he was having people come by to view his art or to see what he was doing, that he would have the studio set up where that was laid out. But I think it's a different, if I'm not mistaken, it has different colors in it, you know. And it's beautiful, but really, my appreciation is more for the black and whites. That's my personal preference.
Good.
Yeah, we I had a phone book of some contacts that Barry had, and they were gallerists, like Cheryl Green and Eugenia Foxworthy. Foxworth. And they are they're gallerists, but Eugenia has moved more into real estate now, but she's very prolific. And both of them are black female gallerists who own their own gallery. So they were helping me trying to save Barry's art that was here, you know. But Lewis was the one who came through and just came. He took anything that wasn't tied down, his desk, his easels, because empty canvases, because there were things there that were expensive and could be reused, you know. So Devin and I decided that he could take the desk and the easels, and he was so curious about what was going on in Barry's studio that he found other things that we didn't even know Barry had done, because we were so burnt out by the time Lou showed up with all the stuff that we had to, you know, go through. So it was a lot. Devin he was able to have at least 80 plus pictures removed from the studio to take down to Georgia. And so what Lewis was able to come in and rescue were the ones that were left behind. So I got the smaller portion of it, but it was very generous of Devin. Because he sat there in the lobby while the people were wrapping the pictures up and putting them on the van. He had to hire a van to transport all the pictures from here to Georgia. And he was very patient about it, but you know, if he hadn't come through, because we weren't able to have a memorial for Barry, because nobody was expecting him to pass when he did. And so Barry wound up being cremated, so there was no real goodbye to him, you know.
And the same thing with Dorothy, because when she passed, Barry was ill, so he wasn't able to have a memorial for her either. So Lewis was gracious enough to play with the idea that I presented to him about holding a special event just for the people in the building, because they were so influential in the building that everybody was asking, is there going to be a funeral? Is there going to be a memorial? And neither event happened for either of them. So this is our way of saying, God, of documenting that they were here, and there were a lot of people who, the history of the building is that it was primarily black, because Dorothy was about black businesses promoting jobs for black people, and she even left behind a fur coat that I found in her closet, because Barry got ill right after Dorothy passed, so he wasn't even able to remove her items from the house, where the fur was by a black furrier who's noted for doing furs for movies and stuff, for a lot of like Cleopatra Jones and things like that. So she was constantly promoting black businesses and uplifting them. And they both were. Sometimes filming companies would come in through Harlem and go through Harlem Restoration, and they wanted to use some of Barry's artwork because they thought he was a novice, so to speak, and thinking that they'd be giving him a leg up by featuring his art in a movie or something. And he was like, he knew his worth, because he knew what he had experienced and been through more so than we even did, So he didn't necessarily need that leg up that they thought they were trying to give him.
Did he showcase other artwork in other galleries before, or?
Oh yeah, he yes he did, but I'm not really sure what galleries, because he has albums, of those little slides that you can put in a viewer and look at, and some of them they have pieces of paper in there, but the slides are not there. So I don't know if those were sold or they're still in the gallery, but I know that I can't say for sure what galleries, but I believe he has. There was an event that he told me about where he and several other artists were competing for their work to be put in a building. And he won that particular thing. But I'm hard pressed to remember what it was, what building it was right now. Just say like maybe there were a dozen people that were competing for the space, to get their artwork in this place. And I don't know if I'm being accurate here, but I want to say it was something like Exxon building or something like that, And he won with a black and white. So.
I know he was good friends with Ed Clark, and they both are black artists who deal with art in the abstract. Can you explain their relationship, if you know anything about their relationship, and how I guess Barry was the lesser known of the two, but also how they influence each other?
They seem to have had a friendship because what I can tell by going through Barry's paperwork and stuff, Ed Clark used to send him like personal letters and things. So they had a friendship, and he has a book of Ed Clark's artwork that's signed. And they seem to have been very close from what I could tell. I know that there's a picture of Ed Clark's that's in Swan's Gallery, I believe it is, that's being held right now. But he was very much impressed with Ed Clark, and from what I could tell when Lewis came in and saw Barry's work, he could see Ed Clark's influence in Barry's pictures, you know. But by that time I wasn't even living in New York, and you know, when Devin asked me about the picture, I said, "You mean the lithograph that's on the wall?" He said, which was an Ed Clark picture, but there was one that Devin really knew was missing. I'm like, I don't remember that. And we have a neighbor across the hall whose husband is since passed, who is also an artist, Singletary. So there were a lot of, this building held a lot of artistry. There were quite a few people here that were artistic at many different venues. So maybe you could say it was a refuge for the artists, you know, because Dorothy seemed to have understood that world well. You know, I'm a fledgling in all this. I'm just trying to piece together what little bit I remember. Because, you know, he had a story for every occasion. So.
And if he were alive today, what do you think he would say about his artwork being showcased?
I think he would be, I don't know what he would say, but I think he would be very happy and deserving. Because he talked a lot. He really did. He could hold you up for hours with his, you know, people that he's met, places that he's been. And, you know, after a while you go, yeah, you know, because like you're ready to go, because you're not really talking, you're just listening, you know. So you start to glaze over a little bit and go, all right.
Oh.
You know, it seems like on some level he lived a charmed life. But I know that as a child, he, you know, he was the more mischief one out of all three of us, so he tended to stay in a little bit of trouble, if you understand what I'm saying. You know, but he found his way through. He found his talent, and he expressed it.
And can you just, because I know he served some time in, you said the Air Force?
Yeah.
Okay. Was he ever, did that, because I know he left, then when he came back, he said he was influenced by being overseas. Is that accurate?
Again, I wasn't that close to him during that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So my memory of that is not accurate, but I'm sure because anything he experienced shows up in his art.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope you have enough footage because, you know, I'm snorting and sniveling.
And then one last question. I think you got an insight to since you were the youngest sibling, he was the oldest. When we were at the studio last, when I met you for the first time, we were going through all the pictures that you picked out, and you found out this person and that person. So after his passing, because of everything he left behind, can you talk about discovering, I don't know if it was another side of him or discovering where his art took him that you didn't necessarily.
Oh, it was a big revelation to me because he touched bases with people that I've only ever heard of, but then I saw them in pictures with him. And like I was saying, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but Romir Bearden, they're in a conversation, and he's very intent. He was the kind of person that if you're talking, for the most part, he would be very much involved into hearing what you had to say. So,
Well,
I'm Jacqueline Carter Brown. I'm 75 years old.
Okay. And how long have you lived in the building?
Oh God. I don't know, almost 20 years. Mm-hmm.
And what's your connection with Barry? How do you know Barry Johnson?
Barry Johnson. Well, he was a neighbor at 270 St. Nicholas Avenue. I met Barry Johnson and Dorothy when I moved in. I think I moved in 1979, 78 or 79. And as always, Barry, he talks to people, but he never told people that he was an artist. He was just a very personable person. And I got to know that he was an artist. And I looked at his work and I liked it, so I bought 2 pieces of it, smaller pieces, because the larger pieces would have taken up all of my room.
and what are those pieces?
Well, they're colorful, picturesque pieces, as you see around me. I mean, they weren't art pieces of people or anything like that. In other words, you could look into them and you could actually see him and whatever you wanted to see. That's why I bought those 2 pieces. Colorful. He was a colorful type of person. It sort of like matched his personality.
These are abstract paintings.
Yes, they're abstract paintings.
And what is your fondest memory of him?
There was a truck in the middle of 124th Street. We live on in a building that's on the corner of 124th and St. Nicholas. And for some reason, this guy was backing up and I was down, trying to tell him stop doing it, making too much noise. And Barry poked his head out of the 6th floor window and said, "Get out of there." I thought he was talking to the driver, but he was talking to me. He didn't want me to be involved in it. "What's the matter with you?" And that's how I really met Barry. I'm like, "Who are you? You can't tell me. I live on the 1st floor because I can really hear all this noise. You're way up there." So we had our differences about who could hear it better. And that's how I met Barry.
And so explain to me, so Barry So you knew he was an artist, a painter. Not everyone else knew he was an artist.
I knew because I used to talk to Barry, and he was able to share. We were able to share different things. He wanted to know, are you a teacher? No. Are you this? No. And I told him I work with an architect. We do buildings. I do interiors. And that's how the conversation started. Because when you look at me, you think I'm a teacher. But I'm one of these hardcore construction ladies. I don't do the work. I'm the one that yells at the top of my voice. It's funny, but construction guys are hard-headed. They are. They really are.
Why do you think Barry never, outwardly told people that he was a painter, even though he had the studio on your first floor?
Well, I guess Barry has always been somewhat of a quiet person, unless you knew him. He never boasted about anything. He just was who he was. He didn't bother people, and people didn't bother him. Hey,
Extroverted, introverted?
I would say he was in between. And that's important because you don't want to be too or too low.
And
Yeah.
drawing. And have you seen these paintings at the gallery now?
No, this is the first time I've seen them. And he used to tell me, yeah, he has paintings that are life-size. And there's no way I could fit these pieces into my apartment because I have a studio apartment. Half the times I'm not even there.
Have you ever visited his studio?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He lived on the first floor and I live on the first floor. So if I heard music, I would knock on the door. He was always busy with his paintings.
And you play music while you paint and things like that?
Music would be playing, yeah. He's just Barry, he's very comfortable with who he was. And I don't know, everybody sort of kind of knew Barry, but didn't know a lot of things about Barry, like he was a painter and things like that.
Can you describe his studio?
Yes, because my guys put up his pull-down bed for him. I said, well, my guys can do that. Your guys? Who are your guys? So I got two of my guys to come.
And so did the studio have a whole bunch of paintings on the walls and paintings up? Or?
No, he had paintings on walls, but he also had a lot of paintings stacked in different places. He had a lot. He really did, and he loved his paintings.
So since you've known him, he's never stopped painting?
He's never stopped painting. Even when I found out that he was sick, I don't think he ever stopped. But I never really asked him. But he was like an ongoing type of person. He just wasn't just, bleh,
Yeah. Yeah. A few more questions. Are you aware of any other artists or musicians in the building?
Yes. One guy, I remember his name was Jack. I have two of his paintings. Anybody else, I don't remember anybody else who I have spoken with. Okay, but there's, I would say, several people that do some type of artistic work.
Was Barry in the building before you got there?
Yes.
And the last kind of loaded question, I would also like to ask you your connection to fine art and visual art at the time, let's say 70s, 80s, when you got to Harlem.
I frequent the Natural History Museum and the Metropolitan. I love museums, and I adore artwork. If I can see myself, I guess, or somebody else in them. I know that sounds silly, but I guess art is, you have to feel it. That's why you buy it, because it gives you a great feeling. I know I'm very much like that. Like music, art and music so like goes hand in hand, and you know.
Pause the camera right there. I'll save this.
My name is Jacqueline Carter Brown, and I'm 75 years old.
Okay. And how did you come to know Barry?
Barry and I, we were neighbors. We both lived on the first floor.
Okay. And describe to me how art and Harlem go hand in hand.
Harlem, as far as I'm concerned, is the capital of Black America in New York. And anywhere that you look, there's an art decision, piece, or whatever in Harlem, because a lot of artists, they do frequent and they do live in Harlem.
And do you, I know people like Ed Clark, these are black artists who do abstract works. Do you find it rare that black artists deal in the abstract?
Not at all. In fact, a lot of artists, they deal with abstract first, and then maybe they might get into doing portraits.
All right. I think that's it.
That's it?
My name Chris Holbrook, 62 years old. I know Barry as my next door neighbor. I lived in the building for 35 years. Sometimes we get each other's mail in each other's mailbox. Just began to know a little bit about him over time. Yeah, it's changed a lot since I've been here, man. Since like Clinton did the empowerment zone thing, it turned a lot more corporate. They used to have people all up and down the 125th Street. During that whole Clinton era, it seemed to have taken some of the art out, you know what I mean? The kind of the personal fiber of blackness out of the community. Gave me a little tutorial of if I was to do a portrait, like the distance between the eyes, the height of the forehead, and the distance of here is usually ones, you know, so he give me a little tutorial on portraits and portraiture and stuff like that. Well, every art, any piece of art, the artist is choosing his, it's a thing that comes out of yourself. It seemed, very individual, that it was coming out of him. I'm not sure, like, if I asked him about art, who would have been his influencers or his proteges or stuff like that. But it does seem very, very much his own style. Yeah, as a person, he dressed, dressed kind of, he had a flashy kind of street style kind of dress. Yeah, he liked film, liked art, stuff like that.
Are you aware of other artists in the building?
There's a history of artists in the building. They used to have, there was a dance troupe called the Silver Bells. Who else did they tell me lived there? Sugar Ray Robinson had once lived in the building. So people prior to me, they may not have unpacked their relationship to the arts, but they would told me there were several artists who had lived in the building before I got there.
And so what is your fondest memory of Barry?
I think probably that time he was telling me about how to do a portrait, how to paint a portrait.
Before?
I've seen this Purple series that he did, like these two over here, but I have not seen some of these other ones. I have not seen,
Okay.
If I had to describe my uncle's art, aside from being abstract, I don't know if this is, excuse me because I'm not an art person per se. It's not my world, but I would call it busy. And I say busy because when you look at his art, to me, it's the type of art that initially it's almost overwhelming because there's so much going on that it's overwhelming. I don't know any other words. I don't know anyone who sees his art and just gets it off the rip. I think you sit with it and you look at it, and it's like watching television. It morphs, it talks to you, depending on what angle you're at, you see different things. And I have never, and I mean this, I've never sat in a room with two or more people looking at the same piece and we all see the same thing. There's almost a level of like, it's like looking at clouds. You can see what the other person sees only when they tell you about it, but you don't see it initially. You see something else. And so his abstract style to me is indicative of his improv style. And there's something to be said about that mixture that makes his art very much alive. There's a sense of life in his work that I don't see in a lot of other people's work. It's rare to me. And I think that's the appeal. It's not just the color schemes, it's literally the life that you see in the paintings, that it's undeniable.
Good. And the next question.
You know, and I can't say it was because he was a Black artist or maybe it was just the timing of it. You know, I can't really say, but I feel like right now is a great time for him because his art is so relevant even right now. Like you don't look at it and say, this is from this particular time. And I think what I really enjoy about his art, when I look at it in the context of Black art, is that I know my uncle was socially conscious, but by the same token, his art is not atypical Black art. To me, when I look at it, you don't know who made his art. And that's what I really enjoy about it the most is like, I'm all for pro-Black. I'm all for things that are overtly Black. But by the same token, I like the fact that this is a piece of art that touches to everybody. It's not, it doesn't have a color bias to it. It's, if you like art and you like abstract and you like to see things in paintings and you like to sit with a painting that's almost like watching a television insofar as that it's always changing and morphing, then his art is for you. And I'm proud of him for that because I think it would have been very easy for him to just stay sort of politically minded and always have to show how Black he is in his art. And he stayed away from that. He had some pieces like that, but that was not what inspired him. And it says a lot about his character and about him as an artist, you know? I don't know what else to speak on.
That's good. That's
Okay.
good. I want you were, but
It's all right.
Okay.
I'll just pick it up somewhere.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty biased to my uncle's work. He has been my favorite artist. I was most impressed with his work, and I think I was saying that he considered himself an improv artist. He was inspired by the jazz legends that he liked to listen to, and I think he just kind of took their way and adapted it towards painting insofar as that he would sit down, turn on the music, and just go at it. And he didn't have boundaries in terms of like a thought of what he wanted to do. He just let essentially the creative process just take over and he just be the vessel in which it came through. So I thought that was an interesting way that he explained to me of his process, because I thought it was going to be a little more complicated and a little more involved and a little more logical. And then the older I got and the more I realized in looking at his artwork, yeah, it would have to be improv, because why would you think to do that? You know, so I admired that about his process, in the sense of that he was honest about where his inspiration was coming from, and that it wasn't so thought out, that he just kind of went with it and just stayed with whatever it was came out of it. So to kind of fast forward to where we are now, unfortunately my uncle recently passed away, and me going up to just pay my respects, because I no longer live in New York, I realized that because it was an unexpected passing that he did not leave any real instructions or any real person in charge of his paintings. And as though I was just going up to pay my respects, once I realized that, I felt an obligation to preserve and try and garner as much of the work as I could. And again, I was not expecting this. And anyone who has ever had to move large paintings realizes that it's an expensive endeavor. So when you're not expecting it and then all of a sudden now you're doing it, you realize, at least I realized, that I might have been in for a little more than what I was prepared for. And so my uncle was fortunate enough to have 2 apartments in one building. One he basically lived in and had his art, and the other one he actually worked in and worked and did his art. And so in helping to just like move out clothes and just clean up in general, I started getting the paintings ready to go, and what turned into just a couple of paintings, turned into a couple of dozen paintings, like a dozen paintings, to a couple of dozen paintings. And it seemed like every time I looked, I was finding more places that there were paintings at. There were paintings on the wall, paintings in the corner, paintings in the closet, painting in this closet. And next thing you know it, I have 80 paintings that now I'm trying to move. And I was not prepared for this. And the crazy part is that though we packed up and moved 80 paintings, we actually had to leave 20. And I live in Atlanta now, and I'm moving these expensive paintings that no one seems to want, but I want, and I care enough to have them. And when I get to Atlanta, I'm still concerned about the 20 or so that are left in New York. And so once I secured the ones that I had in Atlanta, I put them in a safe place, made sure they were good. My mission for the next couple of weeks was just, how do I get these other 20 paintings either to Atlanta or get them someplace specifically in New York? I felt like there's got to be someplace in New York that would want them. I don't know if it was going to be a museum. I thought maybe even a school. I was trying to get them in galleries. I mean, I was really open and desperate to some degree to just find anyone that could just help me, even if it's just storage. That was the other option, was maybe some storage. But we all know New York storage is expensive, and I just wasn't sure about that route. So the story goes, I reached out to a lot of people who were in my uncle's Rolodex and people who had connects with him from the past, and really lobbied to let them know, hey, look, I've got some paintings. If you want to go check them out, I'd be willing to if you can just hold them or put them up or put them on display. And I couldn't really get anybody to do anything because, quite honestly, people are, New York, people are busy, people have schedules, time is money, you name it. And eventually I got a call from my mother, who had a number from me from an associate of one of my uncles. And I reached out to them, and they in turn reached out to somebody who reached out to somebody. And then one day I get a call out of nowhere from this gentleman by the name of Louis Long, and he goes, hey, I heard you have some paintings in the city, and they might be gotten rid of. Is there a way for me to see them? I'm like, yeah, sure, definitely. I'm like, what kind of time are you on? He's like, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm not actually there, but they're in New York. He said, well, we're in New York. I'm like, well, on 123rd. He said, I'm on 123rd. I'm like, well, they're on 123rd in St. Nick. He's like, well, I'm on Clayton Powell. I'm like, okay. He's like, well, what kind of time are you on? He's like, what about right now? I said, give me a second. So I called my mother, who had access to the apartment, and said, hey, I think I got somebody who can come over and come check them out. And Louis went over in 20 minutes and walked over and went inside to see the paintings. And unsurprisingly to me, he was impressed with my uncle's work because it really was Class A work. And I think he saw the value in it immediately, in the sense of the craftsmanship and just the artistry of what was there. And that was just what we left. And so Louis hit me up and said, hey, he called me when he was there with my mom, and was like, hey, we could do this one of two ways. It's like, I got some space in a gallery, or we can maybe put it in a storage unit. Like, you know, what do you think? And we kind of both mulled over it. And I said, look, if you think it'll fit in your space, I trust you, man, because quite honestly, these were going to be garbage. The apartment was going to be cleaned out. And he came over on a Thursday to get the paintings, and the apartment was already cleared out by Friday. So we literally had one day and to get it out. And Lewis put in the elbow grease with his mover and went in there and found pieces out of closets and who knows, in all kinds of strange places, and helped salvage my uncle's work. And in that way of like sort of divine timing and divine connection, I believe, through whether it be a higher power or just my uncle nudging both of us and speaking in our minds, like, or in our ears, saying, hey, you might want to go over here, or you might want to, you know, connect with this person. Now we have a full body of work that once I spoke to Lewis over the course of the weeks that after he had salvaged the work, we realized we had a like-mindedness insofar as that I thought that my uncle's work was important enough because some of the people that he was associated with, that he had a sort of historical relevance. And I wasn't really sure what that was because I'm not in the art world, but I do know that my uncle would name names with other artists that he had worked with and collabed with and were friends with and exchanged art with. And a name that comes to mind that I didn't realize was a popular guy until much later on was Ed Clark. My uncle had some paintings of Ed Clark hanging in his apartment, and just in happenstance and just talking about art in general, he pulls a piece off the wall, turns it around, and on the back it's signed and it goes, "To my favorite artist, Barry Johnson, Ed Clark." Now, mind you, and this is just being quite honest, I do like Ed Clark's work, but in comparison to my uncle, again, I'm biased. So I was like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, nice. This guy said you're his best artist. Okay. And I didn't think much about it. That was my own ignorance, arguably, because I didn't realize who Ed Clark was when he was telling me this. And I guess my uncle knew who he was, but I didn't. But I also knew that they had worked together and, you know, shared, like, I guess, artist secrets and just, you know, they were peers, even if they weren't of the same age range. And I realized that my uncle was part of a different class of artists, and situations like that, or instances like that, I should say, made me really respect even more who he was and what he was doing, and the type of time that he had put into what he was doing, because this was a lifelong's work, and he never strayed from it. He never did other things to get away from it. And quite honestly, good, bad, or indifferent, I believe that though he had relationships, and he had very good relationships, because I was able to speak to some of his ex-girlfriends and letting them know, hey, look, this was that he passed away. And they were all very fond of him, no matter how long ago they had dated him. I realized that no matter how nice these women were, that his first love was definitely hard. And I think they know that too. And it's just a rarity in this world to find somebody who's so immersed in his craft that there's nothing that could stray him away. And I admire that about him, because it says a lot just about what his real dedication was and his real focus was. And I'm even more elated that now we have an opportunity to maybe help bring his legacy out in a time that maybe he was overlooked because of whatever.
Rolling, you can just start however you naturally want to start with it.
Okay. My name is Devin Eggleston. I am the nephew to Barry Charles Johnson, the artist we're here to speak about.
Can we say that again?
Yeah.
Sorry.
My name is Devin Eggleston. I am the nephew of Barry Charles Johnson, the artist who we are all here for. I grew up with my uncle. He was, I have two uncles. I'm not gonna say who was my favorite, but he was definitely up there. He inspired me in so many different ways because of his perceived lifestyle at the time from my standpoint. He was a single guy who moved and shaked and was in all kind of different circles, and to me he was successful. And I jokingly told somebody a story that he never had a driver's license and he used to cab it everywhere in New York, and I just thought, being from Brooklyn, that was the most, like, the coolest thing that could ever be. It was this guy who didn't have a car and he could take a cab anywhere and had no problems. This is obviously before Uber. So to me, he was just a special kind of guy. And he was born and raised in Harlem. I believe, I don't know the exact street, but it was like 100 and something in Convent Avenue. And he was actually born and then passed away within a block of where he was born from. He passed away on 270 St. Nick, and it just so happened that there used to be a hospital right across the street from where he passed away at. I, in a very auspicious way, inherited a life's work of paintings, which, from my estimation, because he had no kids and was never married, that his kids were these works of art, and you could see it in the works of art. It's very special when you sit down with them. You see all the different images and symbols, and just, you could see his passion in his art, in the art. So he grew up in Harlem. He was an athlete. He was a star athlete. He's been in the paper. He has played basketball. He played basketball up against some soon-to-be pros of his era, and then those that were not pros. Some of the street legends that you hear of, like Manigault and Pee Wee Kirkland, and I've heard these names spoken from his own lips, and saying he used to play with them at, polo grounds and all these different places around Harlem and around the city in general. He went to Vietnam as an Air Force, in the Air Force. He didn't stay very long because both of my uncles actually went to Vietnam, and my grandmother petitioned the government to let at least one of her kids out, and so my uncle Barry was able to get out before my other uncle was, because my other uncle was serving 2 tours actually. So in order to not lose both of them or one of them, she was able to get Barry out. And when Barry came out, he took the time after the service to travel abroad with a traveling semi-pro team that allowed him to see places like Germany and Belgium, and it actually inspired some of his artwork. You see through some of the landscapes that he saw, that he was blown away by. And he'd always been an artist. He was admitted to art school and design as a high schooler, and excelled there. He was actually a sculptor, if that's a word, first, and that's actually how he got in the school. And he even had a piece at the Studio Museum when he was in high school that was a sculpture, he was a featured artist in some sort of program or something at that time. My mother told me that her and the whole family went to go see him and go see his work. He also was a singer at some point in time. Him and his brother, my uncle, and another guy had a group, and they won at the Apollo on amateur night in one of their goals. I believe they lost the second time, because I guess when you win, you come back. They lost the second time they went to some younger kids, but nonetheless, that was their sort of 15 minutes of fame there. And then my uncle was sort of a Renaissance man, I guess, because he did so many different things. He was an entrepreneur that I know of. He was never a 9-to-5 kind of guy. He always found a way to make money, and to be quite honest, his art was his main way of paying his bills somehow, whether it be working with other people or just getting stuff commissioned or putting in buildings. He was also part of, which is not really relevant to his art, but he was also part of that time in Brooklyn when the brownstones, when people were trying to revitalize the neighborhoods. He was part of that initiative that went in and was buying up brownstones and converting them, and then bringing up the neighborhood. So he was very much socially involved. I think his time in Harlem and in Brooklyn during the 60s and 70s and 80s and so on really shaped the way he looked at the world and society, and he felt a sense of community and a sense of onus to always uplift his community and try and work within the community to do the best he could to keep it a certain way. He really cared about how Harlem looked, how Brooklyn looked, who the residents were, and quite honestly how they acted. You know, it mattered to him. I grew up watching my uncle do his arts, meaning I was fortunate enough to kind of see the progression of his artwork, whether it been his blue series or his charcoals or even some of his sculptures. I watched him just sort of evolve, and you know, biasly, he was my favorite artist. I would see other people's stuff and I thought it was good, but I was never as impressed as I was with his art. And I will say I'm biased, but I think I have good taste in my biasism. We always would sit down. He would tell me a bunch of stories about his life and just about his process. He would tell me, because I would always ask questions, because I was always been pretty inquisitive, and I would ask, like, what, especially because of the nature of his work. I said, oh, how do you come up with this stuff? Like, and he would tell me straight up, like, he considered himself an improv artist. He never knew what he was gonna paint. He would go into it basically with jazz music on, which was his inspiration. And I think he likened himself, because he didn't really play an instrument, but I think he likened himself to a jazz artist insofar as that he was inspired by spirit and by whatever it was that he was tapping into that allowed him to just go. And he would just go until he was finished, and then he would come back if he felt like he needed to. But a lot of times I think he sat down with a painting and did one at a time, and he went as far as he wanted to go with it.
Over that one more time.
Gotcha.
And on you.
In terms of recognition from my uncle, in this way, I'm not gonna lie, I know some things, but because of my age and when he got a lot of accolades, I was not old enough. I mean, I know he was featured in Studio Museum when he was a high schooler for sculpturing. I know he was admitted to school in art design at a time that was a very I mean, I believe it still is a prestigious thing if the school is still around, which I believe it is. I know what else? In terms of awards, I'm not really sure. I will say this, and from my world, this means a lot. I know he was highly respected in Harlem, and that went a million miles. My uncle, up until the day he passed, was essentially the mayor of Manhattan / Harlem. He was there for 70 something years. He knew everybody. He walked around. He supported all the different local shops, and he was beloved by a lot of people. So, for as long as he had been in the art world, I would assume that he was well known, even if he wasn't famous. And in this day and age, because he was highly respected, that was like the biggest award to me he could ever have in terms of an accolade, was just the respect of other people. That went, as you know, as most people know, in any business, your face card is usually all you have, even if your work is not that great. And I'm not trying to diminish his work, but I think his face card went a lot further than maybe his art did at the time.
Next question. In what condition were some of these paintings in when you found them?
Gotcha. So when I found the paintings in his house, it was interesting because most of them were in mint condition, and walls, dusty though they might have been. But then some were in closets and in corners. And I would say most of the paintings were from good to mint condition. But there were some paintings that I was like surprised that they were put the way that they were put. it was just strange. You know, my uncle loved his paintings, but it wasn't like he had them sitting up in pristine plastic. And I know that now I know there's ways to actually handle your paintings if you're trying to keep them from getting tore up. And not that they got tore up, but I was just surprised. Like I think he was just being so creative that maybe he didn't realize how much he had. I mean, because he had a lot. And I just think he lost the scope of how much stuff he had. It's kind of like, well, you put stuff in the closet and you kind of forget you got these clothes that are sitting in there because you haven't dealt with them in a while, and you just get more clothes.
And you also never stopped painting.
Correct. He just kept on painting. So there was no thought of like, oh, I need to go back and take care of this. He had already moved on to the next set of paintings. And so some were neglected. They may not have been in bad shape, but when I look at them, I go, man, these could have been like this could have went really bad. Thank God he kept up his apartment and had air conditioning in there and all of that good stuff. But yeah, I would say most paintings are in anywhere to good to mint condition. It's just dusty.
Hi, my name is Gaither Smith. I've lived here at 270 St. Nicholas Avenue for 35 years.
Hi, my name is Arlesta Smith. I've lived here for 35 years also with my husband.
Okay. And just say your names again one more time. Just name, not building.
My name is Gaither Smith.
My name is Arlesta Smith.
All right. And so let's do name, relationship with Barry. Well, let's do name, how long you've been in the building first, and then
38?
About 30, we say 35.
35 years. Okay. So we can go one by one with the names and then build. Okay. So we will you first.
Hi, my name is Gaither Smith. I've lived here at 270 St. Nicholas over 35 years, and I've known Barry for the duration of the time I lived here.
My name is Arlesta Smith. I've lived here 35 years also, and I also known Barry for the duration, the time that we lived here.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna pull up the rest of the questions. How did you come to know Barry?
Well, personally, I come to know Barry for, being as neighbors in the building, seeing him every day, always that infectious smile, always kind, always greeting. And we always, corresponded with conversations of sports, today's events. So that's how I personally got to know Barry.
I personally got to know Barry. We were, as we said, we're neighbors. We spoke about certain things until I found out that he went to an art school. I also was interested in art, and that's how we got started with our discussion.
Were you always aware that he was an artist?
No, I was not aware. I found out through him that he was an artist and he went to the school he went to. But I also was interested in art, but I also was an art teacher at the hospital that I worked for. And then I found out that the teacher that I worked with was one of his colleagues that he went to school with. And from then on, it was back in, now and then we talked every time we got an opportunity to. He asked about him, I asked about him, and I started to attend several of his showings.
Well, me and Barry talked about art and how we got into it. I always talked about the Harlem Renaissance, and I struck a chord with him because when you look at art in our culture, it reflects the racial diversities in the community, and what art shows differently with our community. And Barry agreed upon that. When I think of Barry, I think of Augusta Savage, Lawrence Jacobs, some of the great black artists, because his art portrayed the 20th century modernism, European modernism. His art always had bold colors. So when we talked, I was very fascinated that he was on that line with some of the great black artists in our community. Well, my fondest memory is that we always shared his fascination with basketball. He played basketball, pro ball, and he was an avid Knicks lover for the New York Knicks, and that's one of the things that we always would pass during the time we would be in the building. But also, I would talk to him about the different information I would come across of different art showings of that nature. And then I had also spoke to him that my grandson is now a up-and-coming young artist in Springfield, Massachusetts, and he's making inlays. So he was very fascinated with that, and always encouraging me to encourage him to broaden his viewpoint, get outside his comfort zone, and to be able to produce his art in other locations. So that's the fond memories I got of Barry. Very informative, very concerned about his community, and I could say one thing about him. His art reflected his inner love for the Harlem community. That's what I got from talking with him, corresponding with him, and then seeing some of his art, because he showed me some of his sketchings and drawings, and just very fascinating.
We had such a loving for art itself, all kinds of art. It wasn't something that we didn't discuss. It was sculptures, it was different impressions, it was different stances, because I also worked with his colleague, well, someone he knew from high school. So it was like a three-way thing that we did. And we did a lot of I did a lot of sketches. I brought them, but they were not something that I wanted to have produced. So I turned them in. But I went to several of his showings. And the last showing I went to, I still have the invitations that, and also his colleague, they were talking about doing a project together for the Schomburg. He did a sketch for me. He gave it to me to give to Barry, but due to other circumstances, I still have the sketch, but at some time Barry was not able to accept it.
Good.
And he also, I also introduced him some of the pictures that my grandson did from Massachusetts, and he was interested in meeting my grandson at some particular time, but due to certain circumstances, he was not able to.
I describe his paintings as modern Gothic European, bold colors, striking a resemblance, as I said, to some of the famous, as I mentioned before, black artists in our community. What I really enjoyed was his concepts. We have some of the painting showings that he had, and this is some of his art, and you can see how strikingly and how I say the use of his colors. It reminds me of the Depression periods. So you can actually look and make your own, I would say, strong observations of what he's actually putting on canvas, and you can draw, I would say, different conclusions. Everyone looks at his art, but you would actually have a different impression, and that's what I loved about his expressive art.
Mm. You got some of his sketches?
Well, this sketch was the one that I was supposed to present to Barry from his classmate. But this is the one he was supposed to produce. But I still have it. I haven't been able to contact his classmate because I can't find him as particularly. We've tried to. So this is the last one Barry was supposed to produce.
Family. Yeah.
Well, when you look, you can't help but not put art into Harlem, because when you look at, like I said, the early masters that actually perform art, most artists from around the world have always come to the Harlem community, because the art that's produced here is a realism art. And when I say that, is because most black artists in our community, they draw from the passion of life that they experience. Like I said, when you look at Augusta Savage's work and how he depicts the plight of our community, the struggles, the different innuendos that we as African Americans had to experience, low income, possibly the plight of our living conditions are expressed in the different art. You cannot help but to center Harlem as a universal connection to artists from around the world, because what is produced here has been shown in other artists around the world. Because when you look at the different masters, anywhere from Picasso to, I would say, even to Warhol, all these artists came to see the works of Harlem. So when you see art in other genres, you have to see the Harlem Renaissance.
For black people in Harlem, I've been here for several years, quite a bit, but I'm originally from Brooklyn. So it's difficult because I had to learn the different India goes about, but Harlem and Brooklyn are totally different people. We're more outgoing in Brooklyn than we are in Harlem. I've been to every museum in New York City from my middle school through college. So I know a lot about abstracts, impressionism, still lifes, sculptures, and they're all very impressive to me. When I talk to some people about, they're not familiar with a lot about that, especially from Harlem, because they're not as extensive as I was in Brooklyn. But that's why me and the teacher that we were, he was from Brooklyn, and he knew Barry. Barry he spent time in Brooklyn, so we spent a lot of time together. But I find that in Harlem, I've been to Schomburg, I've been to the Studio Museum of Harlem, and it's interesting because I didn't know there was one around the corner on 21st Street. It's the black one.
Yeah.
It's on Lenox Avenue. And that's where the cartoonist specialists are. That's where my grandson he had started the Black Museum there. But it's interesting when you say that a lot of them, you run into them. There's a lot of studios that have opened, that have closed. But the Schomburg stands still, and it has a lot of interesting, because all of my grandchildren have been to the Schomburg, and they find it very interesting also.
Yeah.
But like I said, when you look at these masters like Lawrence Jacobs and the artists that came during the Renaissance period, and going back to the question you asked, Harlem has always been a mecca of entertainment. Even when we look at the origins of jazz, when jazz came out of Chicago, and then when it came to New York, and when we see great artists begin to boldly come to Harlem. Harlem was a mecca for artists from around the country, from music, like you said, from art to sculptures. European artists all came here because there was a flavor of entertainment, and I would say flavor of entertainment is that the world of art entertainment was centered here in this community. So when people came from everywhere, from the Cotton Club to the Apollo Theater, the Renaissance Ballroom, Small's Paradise. When you think about all the famous clubs as the Lenox Lounge and different places like that, the Showboat, all these were entertaining meccas, but at the same time, many great writers, great artists drew from the experiences from different cultures, which made the art live differently in the Harlem Renaissance time period. And I would say that more of the art that has been created in the African community, again, is expressionism art. It shows an impressionism of our struggles as a people, our goals, our futures, and what we have done and come so far as a race of people.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Green. I'm 62 years old and I live in Riverdale, New York.
All right, let's do that again. Look at my fist.
Okay.
And action.
My name is Cheryl Green. I'm 62 years old and I live in Riverdale, New York.
How did you come to know Barry?
I was doing an art show with my friend Paula Collins, who's a jeweler, and we were doing a show at Gallery M, and we invited all of our friends and family, and Barry walked in and he saw Paula and said hello, and then he introduced himself to me, and that's how we met. One of the fondest memories I have of Barry was probably the second time I met him. When he was at my show, he invited me to his one-man show at the Ken Kelleba Gallery downtown, which was owned by Joe Overstreet, who's a famous African-American artist, and Corinne, his wife. The whole show was spectacular. It was room after room of his large paintings, his smaller works, and he was very proud of that because they were the people that recognized him and I think respected him the most. And I think that he felt like he didn't really get his due because, in a way, I believe that certain people were jealous of him, or they just didn't want to. It's almost like sometimes people don't want you to be successful. His work was beautiful, and he had a lot of skill and color theory and color sense. We found out that we both went to the High School of Art and Design. He was 15 years older than me, so we weren't there at the same time. However, that school has so many famous people who went there, and the teachers were all professionals themselves. And Barry had a teacher in sculpture at one point, where one of the tests that he had to take it was more like a test to see how an artist thinks. And his instructor said, we're going to do slab sculpture. So he was presented with a flat slab of clay, and he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted with it. So he wound up sculpting an elephant out of it, which was really quite beautiful, which led to his pattern for a dress that he designed that he called the Unirap, because it was made from one piece of fabric, no seams, and it was based just on how he cut the fabric and folded it, almost the way a person who's Japanese would do origami. But back to his opening, that was his greatest show that he ever did, and yeah, that's one of my best memories with Barry.
Okay.
Barry was an incredible abstract artist. He worked very much with very vibrant colors, very fluid. There's a lot of motion, soft motion in his pieces. My favorites were his paintings where he had saturation of color with almost like a black vignette around each, at the edges of each painting. I have to mention also that he did some very beautiful, he's very much into jazz. And he did a series of drawings that he also had made into T-shirts that he sold at one time of the different jazz greats. And I remember he gifted me and my father T-shirts with Dizzy Gillespie, which are just gorgeous. They're on a black field, and it almost looks like they were done in white chalk. But back to his abstracts, I think he probably went that way in order to express emotion and feeling, and his training at the High School of Art and Design probably had a lot to do with it. He loved music. That's one thing. I have to give the High School of Art and Design its props, because that's a school where you could graduate from art and design and actually go into your profession. That's how thorough the education was there. And the teachers and instructors, they always encouraged people's creativity. And I think Barry felt that being at the High School of Art and Design gave him his most creative moments, where he felt free to explore and learn exactly what he wanted to do when he grew up. He had a series of paintings, 369. I think it was a series of 9 or 12 paintings where each individual painting was a painting on its own, and put together it made one large, beautiful composition, and it took up a whole wall. That he was very proud of. He was very proud of that series of paintings. I believe he also had some work at the Swan Auction House, which was also a gallery, and they champion African American artists. One thing that I do feel that disturbed him was the fact that he wanted to be considered just an abstract, just an artist. And very often the art market wants to pigeonhole you, if you're black, to do art where the subject is black. That wasn't him. He was an African American artist who happened to be black. And when it came to the black community, I don't think they gave him his due. And he didn't feel like they did. Everybody else was, this great African American artist. And for some reason, like I said, it might have been jealousy or just people's attitudes, I don't know. But it bothered him that he wasn't part of that team. And I'm really happy now that he's being recognized for the artist that he is and was. And we're all prepared.
Yes.
As black people, we are all prepared. We just need the opportunity, and we only get the opportunity from somebody opening a door for us. There are subtleties, and it's more or less building like friendships. Mm-hmm. People have to like you and feel comfortable with you, and you build a friendship and a rapport, like right now. So, and that's really what it's all about with us. That's how I feel. That's my experience, And I've gotten help from white people and black people. You know what? Somebody, I don't know whether it was me and Barry we were talking about it, but it's like we're crabs in a barrel sometimes. Just when you see somebody that's trying to reach the top, one of us will pull you back down, because... Okay.
And action.
Barry was not only a great artist who could do, figurative drawing, he also excelled in his abstracts, which were very colorful and fluid. He had some paintings that were very saturated in color in the center and built out into almost like black vignettes. His work had a lot of, it was very fluid, and he always referenced jazz. And he said he listened to the music while he was painting. I remember him and my father used to sit and talk for hours about jazz, and he knew his stuff. He was also a singer. which I don't know many people knew about. But anyway, back to his fine art. I think he felt like he didn't get his due because, okay, the art world is funny because he was a black artist who just created art. And in the art world, if you're a black person, they expect your subject matter to be of black people or of black situations. Well, he was an artist who happened to be black. And that's how he wanted to be, that's how he wanted to be known. And what saddens me is that the black community, I don't think they gave him his due. And I don't know, it's like he almost wasn't part of the club. And I remember when he told me when he was working with Ed Clark, who I also worked for a minute, Ed Clark saw him as a peer. And Barry was helping out, Ed was his friend, and Ed had asked him to help him, clean up some of his old paintings that he had stored. And, Barry agreed, and wanted to help him. And he, cleaned up a lot of his old paintings. And I asked him what he used, as a solution to gently clean his canvases. And he said he used a cotton ball and a solution with a little bit of Windex. And he would gently clean section by section his paintings. Now, when Barry had discussions with people about that, he noticed that from that, that point on, a lot of times people thought of him as, oh, well, he was Ed Clark's helper, as if he wasn't an artist in his own right. And it was insulting. And again, I don't know what it was. And this was usually with black people, they were always trying to not allow him the space to be considered one of the great artists. I don't think he had an understanding about what it often takes to be a recognized fine artist in a general sense, because people aren't going to necessarily come to you. You have to go to them. Unless you're an art scholar, I know a few artists who are educators. They sometimes become recognized because they are noise. I think one of the things that Barry didn't understand was that he didn't understand the business of art, I don't think, because he knew he was good. But I think he expected people to come to him. And unless you're an art scholar or an educator, for the most part, people aren't going to know about you. And he was older than me, so he didn't really, and also the internet wasn't as big a thing. Like, we didn't have Instagram. But I told him, I said, you need to have internet presence and or a place to put your, where your art can be seen. Because they weren't going to come to him. He had to go to them. So I got him, I looked on the Saatchi site. Back then, I think this was like in 2009. Saatchi had a website, and I told him about it. So he had digital images of his paintings, and we put them on the Saatchi site. So that kind of was like his website to show his art, if anybody was interested. Now, Barry assisted Ed Clark when he needed his paintings cleaned up, because he had a lot in storage. And I don't know what Ed's situation was at the time, but Barry, said that he would help him clean up his paintings. And Ed asked him, because Ed respected Barry as an artist and knew that he could trust Barry to handle his paintings in an appropriate way. And I asked Barry, how he did it, and he said that he used a tiny little cotton ball with a solution of water and Windex. and very gently and section by section cleaned up all of his paintings. Now, when Barry told people this, that he worked with Ed Clark, people somehow decided that they were going to take it upon themselves to look at Barry as an assistant versus a fine artist himself. So once again, I felt like, and he felt like he was being discredited as, oh, well, he's just, Ed Clark's assistant. And no, Barry was an artist helping a friend. And Ed saw his talent. Yeah, Barry had a lot of ideas, as all creative people do. And, we had the same background. And, I have a lot of ideas too. We all creative people have ideas. But, I don't think he really understood that when you have an idea, yes, it could be great, but nothing's going to happen unless you do your homework and, get your little team together to help you produce it. Now, a fine example of that is, when he decided to come up with a garment. Again, he was more than just a painter. He was just a creative person, and we both love fashion, and he always made sure his clothes were tailored, and he always had a certain look. But he had an idea for a dress, and again, it was based on the idea. The pattern was based on slab sculpture. So it was one piece of fabric, and he wanted it to be quality. So he wanted it to be made of cashmere. Again, you have ideas. How do you get it produced? Well, he had resources, and one of his resources that he thought about was a young man named Lawrence Rodriguez. And Lawrence Rodriguez was in production with Ralph Lauren at the Ralph Lauren Company, and that's how he made his fortune, to the point where he was able to open up his own art gallery. Now, Lawrence Rodriguez worked for Ralph Lauren. He was in production, so he knew fashion production inside out, and he helped Barry to realize this dress. And the two of them, they went to a factory that Lawrence knew of, and they just wanted to do a prototype. So they were back and forth in Manhattan, and when he got it made, it was beautiful, and it could fit many sizes. It was a wrap dress. It wasn't, earth-shattering, but it was good design. And you could wear it traveling. You could just fold it up, it didn't wrinkle, and, you could wear it as a tunic, you could wear it as a dress, you could wear it with boots. It was just a really great garment. Now, again, creative people, you have ideas, but, executing it is another thing. I tried to get him internet presence because at the time he didn't really, there was no Instagram, like I said before. And, I put his work on the Saatchi website so that he could use that as his website to show his work. But without that internet presence, it was very hard for people to really know or see the beautiful work that he had done. And, he was never one to brag. So there were a lot of people who didn't even know that he was the artist that he is. Another person who championed his work, who recognized him, was a woman who's a dear friend of mine today, who I met through Barry. Her name is Eugenia Foxworth, and she had an art gallery. She was she might have been the only Black woman who had an art gallery in Midtown. And she championed Barry. She saw something in his work, and she used to show his work at her gallery. So she was one of those people who appreciated art for art's sake, not art because he's a Black person, or art, and how come the subject matter isn't African American. Eugenia saw him as an artist, not a Black artist. But whenever she needed to reference a black artist, she always referenced Barry because she loved his work. And, you know, she gave him his due. So, yeah, she's another person who, one of what should have been many people who recognized Barry for being, the great artist that he was. Now, I think really all Barry ever really wanted was to be recognized. He didn't want people, patting him on the back or saying you're great. I think he just wanted his art to be appreciated, and he wanted people to recognize his talent. That's really, I think, at the end of the day, all he really wanted. Yeah, he sang. He had a beautiful voice. That's another thing. That was his other life that I didn't know about. But he sang. He was in recording studios. He drew. He sketched. He painted. He knew how to dance. He loved jazz. He loved his black culture. He loved black people. I often wonder how much black people loved him. Also appearance-wise, because, he had straight hair, he had gray eyes, he was fair-complected. I mean, who knows? But those who loved him really loved him. And those are the people that matter. My family loved him. He became like a member of my family. My sister, my father, my mother. We used to go to the beach together. He used to come, up by me, and we'd go swimming. He loved to swim. He loved to joke around. He was funny. He was also very athletic. This is something else that I don't think a lot of people knew. Me and my mother, we went to a pitch and putt golf course in Flushing Meadow Park, and it turned out he probably is a great golfer too. He just picked it up, and he would drive. The arc of the ball was amazing for somebody who never picked up a golf club before. He was a great swimmer. I'm trying to think of what else.
It's a complete renaissance.
Yes. I'm going to say that. Yeah, he was what they call a Renaissance man, and I appreciated him for that. He was also very generous with his time. He was a good listener. I felt a little shy showing my artwork because he was so much more advanced and he had a collection, I just, had my art that I did, and, I divided my time between commercial art and fine art, but he was a fine artist to the core. And I'm glad he was allowed to be that all throughout the years, ever since he left art and design. I think Barry died too young. He was a good man. He was a great artist, and it's just a darn shame that he's being recognized more probably now that he's not here than when he was here. But thinking about him makes me smile. We had a lot of good times together. We both shared the love of our high school, art and design. We were art and design people to the core. And I just hope that everybody else can appreciate his artwork as much as I did and do. And just enjoy it. Look at it, appreciate the colors, the depth, what he put into it. Know that he was listening to jazz, which he loved. Look, just take a look.
Okay, hi, my name is Jeffrey Longmore. I am 62 years old.
Okay.
How did you come to know Barry?
So, I know Barry because I live in 270 St. Nicholas Avenue, and just someone that I would always speak to when we had a moment to exchange conversation. Very nice man. I always admired how he carried himself, how he dressed, because he was sharp, like, and it's like, wow, I know he's older, but he was always boom, boom, boom. And yeah, just somebody I would always have a conversation with. I miss seeing him, you know, and I've been seeing him for the last 20 years. I moved to 270 St. Nicholas in September of 2005. I say lucky enough to get in the building. I think that, no, it was because of Ms. Vaughn, who was the building manager at the time, who was also very close with Barry. I always thought that they were mother and son because that's how I heard them refer to their relationship.
Oh.
But
She was older than him?
Huh?
She was older than him? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. She was older than him, and I know that in her later years, when she had fell ill, that if she was out of that building, he always had her. He took care of her. He was a very good caregiver for her because she had got to the point where, you know, she relied on a wheelchair, and from what I know, she had she used to have to go to dialysis. He went with her every time. If you see her, he was pushing her wheelchair, and yeah. And I would have conversations with the both of them. I mean, I just miss them. I really do. Yeah. Very, very, very nice. Like I mentioned before, this man, he would always speak. And he would always just have good conversation, whether it be about politics, the building. I remember one time when I moved from to the apartment that I'm currently in, and he asked me one day, he said, "Is there a lot of noise on 124th Street?" And I said, "You know what? It is." And he was like, he said, "I've been trying to get it down in the buildings to change their times of deliveries and things like emptying the trash." They had this big trash bin, and like clockwork, 11 o'clock at night, it was so loud, I couldn't hit my TV. But, you know, talking about things like that, and like many of us in the building, he loved the building. You know, it's home. It's home.
Did you know that he was a painter?
Actually, no. I only heard of paintings once he passed, and his sister lives next door to me, and she was talking about that she had to figure out what to do with his art, and I was just, I never knew that. Living in 270 St. Nicholas, I don't know if you remember, you see how the courtyard is? On a nice summer day, it could be 10 tenants in front of the building, all conversating. But we never got into what he do for work or what he do for a hobby. So unfortunately, I never knew that he was a painter.
And he didn't live on the first floor. His studio's on the first floor?
Yes.
And he lived, okay, gotcha.
Well, I always tried to figure out how that went, but I don't give nobody business. I know he had an apartment on the first floor. It's a studio. And I know that when Miss Vaughn got sick, I always saw him on the 6th floor. And I now know that's a huge apartment. I didn't know that apartment was that big. Because like I said before, I don't go in a lot of people's houses within the building.
Right.
You know, we're all impassive, pretty much.
And prior to him passing away and hearing about the paintings that he did have you ever seen his paintings before?
Unfortunately, no. They're beautiful. Unfortunately, no, I did not. We never even, I don't even recall us talking about art. I would always see him leaving the building. I would always see him, like I said, he's always a good dresser. If he had time, we would exchange words, we would have conversation. But I never knew he was a painter.
So 20 years you've known Barry. Right? And never had a canvas in his hand going to his room, nothing like that? Wow. Never mentioned it himself? Wow. That's crazy. So having seen his paintings now, any first thoughts? And do the paintings
I'm looking at the colors, and so Barry was tall, and I'll say it, he was a nice looking man, you know, and I'm looking at the colors, and a lot of the colors that I see in his paintings is a lot of the colors that he would wear. He would wear green, he would wear the burnt orange, he would white, and he looked together. He was a put together man. When you saw him on the street, he just looked like, I'm trying to find the word. He was well put together. And if he spoke to you, he always had kind things to say. Like I said, we would have conversations. When COVID hit, at times he would be coming in with Ms. Vaughn, and we would talk about what's going on with COVID and hoping it's passing, hope you're taking care of yourself, and you know, stuff like that. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, any question?
So one of the things that we've heard about is that there are other artists that live in the building. Are you aware of other artists that were in the building?
No. No, that's not true. So, there's and I can't remember his name right now. A few weeks ago, there is a man that lives in the building, and we started speaking. He might be in the building maybe 3 years, about 3 years. But I was, again, this is a building where you speak. If you get a chance to have a conversation with somebody, you have a conversation. There's very nice people in that building, but this particular man, I was leaving, and he was coming in, and he was like, hey, I'm an artist, and I have some paintings on display at Columbia University at the Manhattanville campus.
Sure.
And I work for Columbia University, but up at the medical center. And I was like, really? He said, yeah, it's on expedition. He said, if you get a chance, just go by and check it out. And sure enough, I took the shuttle, Columbia shuttle, and I was like, wow. It's an exhibition. It's just two huge paintings on 300 years of Black inventors. and they're on display at Columbia University, Manhattanville campus. The building is called the Forum.
Yeah. So I guess really honestly, my last question. Well, let's go back. Are you from Harlem?
No, I'm not originally. I grew up in the Bronx. I moved to Brooklyn. I moved to New Jersey, and when I was leaving New Jersey, I went back to Brooklyn, and I was like, okay, what are you gonna do? I said, well, if I find an apartment in Harlem, that's where I really want to be, because I always feel like Harlem is central. And I said, but if I find something else, because I was in downtown Brooklyn, that's affordable, I'll stay in Brooklyn. Fortunately, I'm here in Harlem. I ain't going nowhere. When he wasn't with Miss Vaughn, I would always see him. Sometimes I would see him on 125th Street. As far as how connected he was to the art scene, we never had those conversations, but like I said, if you saw him, you knew that he had knowledge. I knew that he was a Harlem resident for a long time. So it wouldn't surprise me of his connection with anything going on in the Harlem art scene. I'm sure that he probably was looking forward to this studio museum opening back up on 125th Street. I know I am, because I didn't go before they started doing the renovations, but I ran into my niece the other day, and she lives right here on 123rd Street, and she was like, I said, what are you doing for your birthday? Her birthday is November 15th. She says, well, the Studio Museum opens that day. She said, that's what I want to do. I said, well, maybe I'll go with you.
Yeah.
I want to see what's going on in there.
Well, thank you so much.